Camille, welcome to AEI.
It's great to be back, Christina.
Oh my goodness, but you know that 21 years ago, I don't know, it was today, but close to today, we were interviewed by Ben Wattenberg for the AEI program Think Tank, which aired on PBS. The question was, has feminism gone too far? And I looked at the transcript, and it's amazing because all the things we are saying are truer today than they were 21 years
Absolutely.
ago about the excesses of feminism, the victimology, the male bashing, the panic over sexuality. At the time, 21 years ago, we were confident that it would be corrected. It was simply too mad to succeed. But it's still here.
I know. Well, Christina, we sent up early warnings. You heroically, in the late 1980s, were in direct confrontation with women's studies professors at a time when
philosophers.
Yes, at a time when I could not get published. Okay, and finally, after my first book, Sexual Personality, was released in 1990, you wrote to me and told me of your problems. Okay, and we've discovered each other as allies, and that our status, it seems to me, as truth tellers, okay, is historically unchallenged. Okay, and I think that people are going to start to wake up and to realize if they'd listened to us to begin with, we wouldn't have these problems now.
We wouldn't, and it was so obvious to me. I was criticizing the feminist theorists at the American Philosophical Association, and what they were writing at the time was just warmed over Marxism, with so much animus to American society, to men, to everything, to art, to beauty, and it seemed to me that it wouldn't take long for it to correct itself. It was never corrected. Mm-hmm. And what happened is you and I believe, won the argument. Mm-hmm. In the journalists agreed with us, and the court of public opinion was on our side. They won all the assistant professorships. They just quietly worked. They didn't care about criticism because all criticism is by definition backlash.
Well, a lot of people dropped out of graduate school. Okay, the really free thinkers, the independent minds, couldn't take the kind of conformism and the PC ideology that they had to kowtow to. I mean, I got letters like that once I was known in the early '90s. Letters came from all over the country, from former graduate students who said they knew they had no future in the profession, okay, because there was a total kind of brain dead attitude. You had a servile, sycophantish attitude you had to have to certain received opinions.
Absolutely. In our interview 21 years ago, you mentioned the sort of Kremlin-esque, feeling in feminism as a Kremlin-like environment, mm-hmm. so much censorship and excommunication and so forth. And students today don't realize that there had been this kind of purge of anyone who was a dissident. I happened to have tenure when I started criticizing it, but it would be career diminishing or career annihilating to criticize feminism, even more so today.
Right. Well, when I was a graduate student at Yale, which was 1968 to 1972, I was the only person doing a dissertation on sex, okay, at the graduate school, okay, and I had trouble getting a job, because of it. I was the only openly gay person at the Yale graduate school, okay. There were a lot of closeted people, and I didn't even have a sex life, okay. I thought it was important to put a gay identity out there, but from the very start, okay, as feminism's ideology cohered and solidified, I could not have a single conversation, okay, with feminists either inside or outside the academy. They could not stand, again, just what you say, anti-art, okay, anti-rock and roll at that time, anti-Rolling Stones, okay. They would not take seriously anything that has to do with biology and hormones or anything like that. I was completely ostracized. But I belong to the pro-sex wing of feminism, also pro-art, pro-beauty, pro-fashion, pro-Hollywood. All of these things were anathema.
Pro-glamour.
Pro-glamour. But then, thanks to Madonna, there was this new dissident wing in the 90s, which won. Okay, the pro-sex wing of feminism won. But now, we won all these gains, but the institutionally entrenched feminists, and commissars, right, have brought it all back to square one again. All the new freedoms we won in the 90s and the pro-sex insurgency are gone again.
I mean, it's amazing, and it's a kind of axis of intolerance with deans and fanatical young feminists, and the United States government, because the Department of Education has sent this directive to all the schools that they have to clamp down on harassers and so forth, and they've defined it so broadly, that it includes, if you overhear someone telling an off-color joke, you can bring them up on charges of harassment. So we have this little reign of terror, this hyper-Puritanism. It's as though, George Orwell's Junior Anti-Sex League has occupied feminism.
It's truly Stalinist, absolutely. Now, I take a very extreme view, which is that colleges and universities should never interfere in any way with the social lives of the students. It's up to the students to regulate themselves. If a crime is truly committed, it must go to the police. Right? And so a lot of these problems would stop, okay, if universities would confine themselves to education and not to the surveillance, okay, of students' private lives. Now, our generation won these freedoms. It was in loco parentis when we arrived in college.
Yes.
Right?
Parietal hours.
Parietal hours. My girls,
young men wouldn't be allowed in your room. And then if they were there, well, this was right before I got to college, but you had to have all of your feet on the ground at one time. You had to look through your door. People managed to do things.
Well, in 1964, when I arrived in college, our women's dorm, the girls had to sign in at 11 o'clock at night, whereas the men could run free all night long. Okay, so we are the ones who demanded that the authority figures get out of our sex lives.
And we wanted to be as free and as wild as the boys.
Yes, and they said to us, no, the world is dangerous. We need to protect you from rape. And what we said was, give us the freedom to risk rape. Okay, these are the freedoms that we won. And now the younger generation of girls want the parental figures back in. Okay, it is deeply Stalinist. It is deeply infantilizing. It is deeply reactionary. It has nothing to do with feminism.
It's fainting
this is a
couch.
retreat.
It's fainting couch. It's Victorian ladies swooning on their chairs.
Yes.
And you've heard about the safe spaces, young women. I gave a lecture at Oberlin and Georgetown a year ago, and they organized safe spaces for students who were triggered by, it was a philosophy professor was going to induce PTSD because of what they objected to is that I might have some ideas that invalidate their experience.
They're institutionalizing neurosis.
It's
what they're doing.
True.
It's absolute madness.
And have you heard the fashion on campus now is called intersectional feminism. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's supposedly very progressive, and it's going to take feminism to a place where it is taking account of women with multiply marginalized identities, on and on. But all of the women, the practitioners, seem to meet at the intersection of propaganda and neurosis and rage. And they're bullying people. They're using feminism now. They're telling men, check your privilege. Mm-hmm. And
well, I think it's a good idea that feminism be critiqued by class issues, because what I have said all along is that what is being demanded is a kind of bourgeois protection, okay, a white middle class girl, okay, a kind of style, okay, the perfect little girl emerging from her parents' living room wants the same kind of protections on the college campus. So I've always felt there was a bourgeois element in this that was never sufficiently critiqued, and that what I see on the street are Latino women, African American women, okay, who may be middle class but have a working class background, as I did, as an from an Italian immigrant family, who are able to handle themselves on the street, able to speak back, don't mind having strong voices and strong gestures.
Well, intersectionality started with those women. So it was a group of African American women who were just fed up with the women's movement attending only to the needs of highly professional middle class, upper middle class women, but it has been appropriated by mostly middle-class white women on the campus. Mm-hmm. So safe space was actually a word that was used in early black feminism, as where black women could just, and Hispanic women, places where they could just talk to each other and they weren't censored and they could speak their minds. But now it means a place where, for example, young women at Brown University, if there's a debate that upsets them, they flee to a safe space where it was described in the New York Times by Judith Shulevitz. They had coloring books, crayons, tapes of frolicking puppies, bubbles. I mean, this is what feminism has come to.
And it's what education has come to, okay? Absolutely. The definition down, they're therapeutic, what can I say? Therapeutic resorts is what education has turned into.
Oh, yes, they have feeling circles. They have reflection journals, and it's this odd mix of therapy and anger, because the good word for this style of activism, they call them cry bullies, and because they combine, they're both victim and victimizer. And they sort of do to other people this new style of campus intersectionality. They actually do to other people what they claimed was done to them. They treat people, they objectify, and they stereotype, and they demonize, and then they try to get people punished.
Well, Christina, this is coming from the public schools, all right? It's coming from their public school education, which was devoid of knowledge of world history and world geography, and it is nothing but navel-gazing and diversity training and being in all kinds of instructions about social interaction. When in fact, if the atrocities of history were revealed to young people, okay, they would be able to put their own little hurt feelings into perspective.
They have no perspective.
No.
And I think these anti-bullying programs, they're learning that even the slightest insult is a major event. You must bring in the adults. It was terrible. He called me a name. So they come to college thinking that if someone disagrees with them or says something that's distressing, that it's a catastrophe.
Yeah. This is what I call my feminism. Amazon feminism. I've called it drag queen feminism,
right.
Street smart feminism, because the drag queens of old knew how to handle themselves on the street. Okay, they could be a 6 foot tall, African American guy, okay, in a dress, okay, and he knew how to pull off his high heels and defend himself on the street, okay, and what a tongue they had, etc. And now everything is about weakening students, not strengthening them.
Oh, it's exactly that. And now let's talk about the young men. Can you imagine being a young man on campus today? And what I see happening is just the way society used to police the sexuality of gay people, it's now sort of open season on the sexuality of heterosexual males.
Absolutely.
They're monitored, they're policed, and demonized.
And neutered. They're
Yes.
neutered. By the time they get to the Ivy League, okay, they've been neutered. Everything's been stripped off of them. Okay? They've been made to feel ashamed of anything virile. Okay, they have nothing to identify with. Right?
And they're taught their masculinity is a pathology in need of a cure. And then it's offered to them in these gender studies programs. And it's not just gender studies. Now this philosophy that demonizes men, it's throughout the curriculum, and you're absolutely right. It's going on in the high schools.
Yeah, it's coming early on. Okay, so then people wonder, why are video games so violent? Okay, why is there so much porn on the web? Why? Because the imagination is being repressed and censored. Okay, and forcibly cleansed of anything that's authentically animalistic or sexy or vibrant. Okay, so you have all of the imaginative energy of the universe now going into these other forms, where it becomes much more violent. When people see it, they go, "Oh, this is so atrocious, this is so awful." Well, guess what? Okay, you've made a whole area of life impermissible. You made all kinds of human desires and fantasies impermissible, and so it has to come out someplace, and that's where it is.
That's right. And what happened last year was a group of cultural critics from, liberal arts colleges started writing for magazines for video games. I mean, websites and these cultural critics started to attack the gamers and tell them that their games were sexist and that they were contributing to the rape culture. And the gamers were not like the young men at the Ivy League. The gamers fought back. This became known as Gamergate. The press has completely misunderstood it and defamed the gamers. They were just defending a hobby that they love. And I made a video about them in my Factual Feminist series and defended the gamers, and then they started to call me based mom. And I am a mom, and being based means being sort of authentic, genuine, no nonsense, and cool. So that's good. And so I'm sort of based mom on Twitter. I've been talking about you and sending out your things. They call you a based goddess.
Oh, for heaven's sakes! Fantastic.
So the gamers they appreciate what we're doing because they had to fight the battle all by themselves. They were confronted, and there are subcultures out there, groups of people that, hobbyists who read comic books, and now these gender critics are coming in. They're not just in the universities; they're in all the subcultures and turning them into very unhappy places. But they made a mistake when they went after the gamers because the gamers fought back, and the gamers know a thing or two about winning. They like to win.
Well, the entire world of animation and video games and cartooning, this is the realm of pure imagination, and it must be protected. It's like art, okay?
It is. It's the art, and and the world of gaming is diverse. And if groups of women, there's a small group of very cool gamers. It's mostly guys and a small group of women. But if women want, I don't know, if they want video games about Downton Abbey or something, they can make them.
When you see, it's like when you are not exposed to complex works of art, like Dostoevsky, for example, right? Then you end up with a simplistic view, okay, of human life. You see this utopian view. Somehow everything can be, like butterflies and birds and so on. And the dark side, okay, of human existence is completely missing, okay, from these people's experience or study. Now our generation, I think, was more realistic because our parents have been part of the Depression, World War II. The Holocaust was huge. Okay?
Absolutely.
And so we had a sense of reality about what is important, what is barbaric in human history. Okay? And it's this idea that you can micromanage reality down to the pleasant. It's like a kind of Doris Day view of existence. It's like so reactionary. People don't realize it's sentimental. It's middlebrow. Okay, it does not belong on a college campus.
And they are so sanctimonious about it. The sanctimony alone is enough to drive you mad. And what the students are doing now, and this is at Oxford University, I think you know about this, the young women are demanding trigger warnings for anything that's violent or unpleasant in a classroom. And so I'm thinking, again, trigger warnings in a history class because you're going to study
law. I think it also had to do with study of law.
Oh yes,
anything that had to do with like rape cases, they had to have a trigger warning.
Well, there's a group of professors at Harvard Law School who are opposed to this because they have young women who are going to be studying law, for some of them to be litigators, but they do not want to hear even the word violate. They've been asked to excise upsetting terms. Well, this is... What is this? What kind of world are we going to have when these people graduate?
It is so regressive. It's like the era of the Hollywood studio production code, when violence was also censored out, not just sex, and that's why Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in 1960 changed modern film and opened it to all kinds of representations of the reality of human existence. Right? I think that from what I can see, most feminists seem to lack a sense of of psychopathology. They don't understand the most extreme manifestations of human psychology. So they think they can micromanage everything. They think that they can somehow fine-tune the entire world to be entirely safe. Okay, the world will never be entirely safe, okay, for any human being, male or female. Okay, the idea that somehow a girl going out at night, okay, alone, okay, is going to, as long as everyone has graduated from an elite school, okay, be somehow protected against an attack from a maniac, right?
From a maniac, from a psychopath. And if you tell a young woman you should not get, you should not binge drink, and then go out and walk around. You're courting danger. Oh, well, tell men not to rape. Don't tell us what we have to wear.
It's called blaming the victim. Okay, if you try to give good advice to be street smart, okay, about how you dress and how you behave, and to be aware of your environment and know how to handle yourself in a potentially dangerous environment, that's called blaming the victim.
And it's not that men are predators, but there are predators among men.
There are truly insane people.
Yes.
Right. The human mind remains primitive. The human mind remains half animal. Okay, and if you completely remove biology from your consideration, then you're going to end up with this kind of Girl Scout code. They have that like Girl Scout view of
because
how
it's all socially constructed.
Yes,
and so we can just rejigger it and re-engineer it.
They are in this fantasy world. They think that they can produce a sexual utopia when all of the excitement and interest of sexual relations comes from potential danger. Guess what? Gay men have known this for thousands of years. Gay men go out everywhere around the world, okay, and court danger and death. Okay, every time they pick up a rough trade on the street, okay, happens all the time. Do you hear gay men complaining all the time? When gay men trying to micromanage the entire world so they can pick up strangers, okay, in bus terminals, okay, without danger? No, gay men find the danger a kick. Now, why is it then that men, okay, have that kind of more sophisticated sexuality, but no, girls are still children. We must always protect them. Okay, they're tender flowers. This is so regressive. This is not feminism.
I know.
Nor is it modernism.
It's
as you say, Victorian.
It's Victorian.
Yes.
And it's also you take and feminism is full of so many bad ideas that should have been laughed out of court. For example, this idea of the male gaze, and they use this. That's, woman is treated as object, passive.
It's Laura
He's the
Mulvey's
agent.
idea,
Exactly,
from the 1970s. Okay, and it absolutely, it just polluted film criticism. And Laura Mulvey is a very nice person. I've met her at the British Film Institute in London.
I think she's changed a little bit.
But she knows nothing about the visual arts. Okay? You cannot just, wade into film criticism and start talking about the male gaze without knowing something about the history of art, okay, and of perspective and of vision and so on. Okay, the male gaze is a foolish idea; should have long ago been discarded.
And it's not as if in gay culture we don't find the male gaze. I mean, gay males enjoy looking at pictures of beautiful, idealized.
And there you have just disproved this stupid theory, okay? Because gay men know when they look at a beautiful young man, okay, that they are not creating some sort of powerful subordination, okay, on that man, okay? They know they're looking up in admiration at that beauty, okay? This has been part of Western art since the Greeks.
And it's how men look at women, and yes, they're enjoying. But they're also often intimidated.
Very intimidated. And biologically, okay, it appears to be that the visual apparatus is much more connected to male sexuality than it is in female terms. And this is what women don't understand. They think they can put on every kind of sexy costume, and it's merely decor. That it does not carry its own message.
Right.
Right. It's right. Because they don't see things as visually as men do. Okay. I don't know whether I have the male gaze or what, but I totally understand this. Okay. There's a tremendous charge in female sexuality. Women today, young women, they want to wield the power of female sexuality without then accepting any of the consequences of it.
That's right, and it's. I think what we're seeing now on the campus is we have this hyper-Puritanism, this policing of sexuality, and then all of these functionaries, the apparatchiks, the universities. I read the University of North Carolina has 40 or 50 sexual harassment, sexual assault.
Oh my, what a waste of money.
Workshoppers, and they're busy. They go back and
forth.
They go back and forth to conferences. They get new ideas, and it used to be that a lot of the theories we objected to, they were inspired by French philosophy, and there was a lot of obscure nonsense. Now, a lot of the scholarship is driven by these apparatchiks, some functionaries in university and their little findings, which is all propaganda, advocacy research. So they find that, turns out that Swarthmore is a rape culture. Where on earth are women more women safer? But they now these sexual harassment assault counselors. They have fact books and little videos, and they bring kids in for orientation and tell them they actually describe the campus. It's as dangerous at Oberlin and Wesleyan as war-torn Congo, and the young men. So the young women are frightened, and so they've introduced so much paranoia.
Yeah.
And
it's the bureaucrats.
And the culture of blame. And a young man can be destroyed because simply by being accused is...
the kangaroo courts.
In these kangaroo courts.
The bureaucrats have taken over the universities. The faculty have also very critically lost power over the past 30 to 40 years. And the faculty has been utterly passive and not pushing back against all of this.
Where have they been? When we were talking 21 years ago, I thought for sure more scholars would come forward, because I do believe that this panic, this Salem witch trial atmosphere, it was created by scholars working with the university functionaries, but it's going to take scholars to stop it. Where are they?
Yes, that's right. They're afraid. There's a fear. Once you tangle with the bureaucrats, they have all the power now. There's no, and now with federal regulations behind it, these intrusive.
Well, this is it.
I'm hoping Congress is going to roll this back. This overinterpretation of Title IX.
Back in the 1990s, when we were winning the argument, and we had the support of the media, and there were all these great writers that took our side, pro-free speech. It was taken for granted. And people would make fun of the courses. They would look at the MLA, and there would be these silly courses on, cross-dressing in medieval Valencia, or autoeroticism in the early Jane Austen.
Right.
And it was fun. And then the media, I think, got a little tired of it and thought it had gone away. It didn't go away. It got much worse. And if you look at the curriculum now, the courses that kids take, on Twitter, there's a Twitter site called Peer Review. And all he does is report show abstracts in journals. It's so shocking. And it never ends. And you think they've reached the ultimate of madness. I mean, there was an article, just to give an example, and this isn't the worst, feminist glaciology. It's a feminist study of glaciers. It draws on feminist post-colonialism and feminist political ecology. What are these fields? There's a field, feminist political ecology. What do they read? And it must just be slogans and mixed with a little propaganda, a little paranoia thrown in. One course after the other. So are they taking history of Western civilization? Are they learning about art? Do they know major historical figures? No, but they know, they could talk about, these arcane little propagandistic topics.
Yes, so the core curriculum was abandoned. Okay, as these new microfields came in, women's studies, African American studies, and so on, and identity politics sort of changed the curriculum in the 1970s. So then all of a sudden, the whole history of Western art, well, that's classist, it's racist, etc. We have to abandon that. And so what you have now is a whole generation, in fact, 2 generations probably, of graduate students who are incapable actually of ever teaching in a broad narrative way, the old wonderful survey courses. Right. Now, what I'm calling for, is an attack upon the curriculum, a reduction by 60% of all these silly electives thrown out, and a compulsory return, to teaching within these core ideas, that are oriented toward ancient to modern. Because another thing, in addition to what you just mentioned, the fragmentation, is that too many courses now are dated in the present. They're present from after the Enlightenment or even after the 19th century. So you have a real imbalance in the curriculum. So that the young people have no sense, of the ancient civilizations and the way they rose and fell, over time. They have no idea of the world. They think that all the evils of the world are isolated in Western culture. They have no idea about the atrocities and the oppressions of empires all over the world and so on. So what we need to do, I discover in my students, coming from a broad range of preparations, from now and then there'll be a private school student, but mostly they come from good suburban schools or from bad inner city schools, and they know absolutely nothing about the chronology of human life. And hence they look around them and they see things that are flaws in our current system, and they believe that these flaws can be fixed, and that all other cultures in the history of the world were somehow a paradise on earth. When in fact we're enjoying the most liberties ever as women.
All these students who are so hostile to the United States because it's a capitalist, cis, hetero-patriarchal, oppressive, imperialist system, these sorts of terms are taken seriously. Well, compared to what? What other country? I mean, we're far from perfect, but we're a struggling democracy that's done more to address racism and classism and sexism than any country I'm aware of. And but it's almost as if they don't know that. And they don't know that, well, we have experimented with systems, that don't have free markets, and they didn't work out very well. The students don't seem to know that. They don't know the history of communism.
Oh, they have no sense of economics or much less
economic
theory.
Illiteracy.
No. Yeah.
And so they very confidently and they've been taught in their classes. And what astonishes me as someone who was a professor of many years, I always thought it was a sacred commandment, thou shalt teach both sides of the argument. Right. So in any philosophy class, I would make sure, whatever we were studying, I'd try to bring, the best that was thought and said on both sides. Well, in these classrooms, in many classrooms, it could be, especially anthropology, sociology, not philosophy. Philosophy is so far immune to this, although it has other problems.
Literature, throughout the humanities.
Literature, and then, of course, gender studies, all the ethnic studies classes. It's largely one point of view. I mean, they have their doctrinal feuds, but it's the gamut from A to B. They leave out all other perspectives. Conservatives aren't there, heaven forbid. Libertarian perspectives not there. Common sense has no place. And so the students have this sense that they've been exposed to, what is, they take to be settled knowledge. It's not settled.
Yes. Well, this is another thing I'm calling for, is that the profession has not paid sufficient attention to this question of advocacy in the classroom. Okay? In the way, I think that it's important that teachers have opinions inside the classroom and out. However, they have an obligation, ethical and professional obligation, to identify what they are saying as opinion, okay, and to state openly to the class that every person in the class, okay, has the right to express a contrary opinion and to hold it without the rest of the class scorning it or creating a hostile environment, etc. Right? But that's totally gone from the profession. Okay? The idea of the ethics of teaching, okay, as well as the ethics of research, are no longer a subject of study, okay, by the profession itself.
Oh, this is very important to bring back. And just in terms of effective teaching, what I love to do, because I loved it as a student, you'll remember this, this is especially true in philosophy, you would read a set of philosophers, let's suppose philosophers defending free will in a metaphysics course, and you tend to agree with them as you read them. Then the teacher would switch and you'd read the determinists and the critiques. And then you would think, how did I ever believe that? And you have that wonderful intellectual experience of changing your mind or realizing that I'd been wrong, now I'm right, or maybe I'm wrong. And then you have this, you develop this sense of some humility that you have to take into account a full range of opinion. This is what I did in my philosophy class. This is what every textbook I ever saw in philosophy does this. But on one occasion, and this is probably what prompted me to start criticizing feminism, the chair of my department asked me to teach a women's studies course, feminist theory. And I sent away for textbooks. And I thought, okay, I'll teach it. I mean, I'm a feminist, I'm a philosopher, I'll teach feminist philosophy. I assumed, I don't know what I thought it would be, historical figures saying some terrible things and some good things. And then I thought maybe it was people pro and con abortion or surrogate motherhood, affirmative action. No, what it was a series of rather paranoid texts. These were feminist philosophers writing these, smart women really, but they were ideologues. The readings were mutually reinforcing.
Right.
And there was a lot of false data. That's where I became alert to the role propaganda. You take these sensitive, mostly young women in these women's studies classes. They hear that 1 in 4 of them will be raped, that they're going to be cheated out of 25% of their salary, and have a massive loss of self-esteem. And that's only if they're not already dead from an eating disorder caused by, patriarchal standards of beauty. They learn this. These sorts of things were in the textbooks. And I was just appalled at the lack of balance and, as I said, the propaganda and then the ideology. So that's when I went to the American Philosophical Association, read a paper criticizing, and I thought, like other times I'd been there, you argue, it's combat, and I was prepared for that. And then you go out for drinks. That's typically what happens. Well, we did not go out for drinks. The room was full of feminist philosophers. Some were hissing, stamping their feet, and I was excommunicated from a religion I didn't know existed. And then it was a year or two after that, I think I was reading the New York Times, and it was about this woman, Camille, Paglia. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it, and I was riveted. And soon after, you spoke at MIT, and I went. It was a rainy night. I went out. It was at Brookline, and I had a little child at home, but there was nothing to keep me away. And the room was filled. There were all of MIT.
Thousands of people.
And already they had videotapes in the hall, video cameras in the hall, so students could, screens, so students could say.
People came from all over the Boston area.
Were there.
They had the police there to handle the crowd.
Yes, they had the police there. And I think that evening, you may have deprogrammed, 1,000 students. You were there, and you were just telling the truth.
Well, half of the crowd was against, half was for. I felt like I was like steering a ship on a stormy sea. I did some of my best improv comedy ever that night. I was putting them on.
If only we had that on tape. These days we'd have you on YouTube. You'd have millions of views.
So there's a transcript of it. Okay,
it was one of the most thrilling
book.
Intellectual experiences of my life, and for all those students. And I remember there were a group of people, I forget, they had a name for themselves. They were all dressed in black. And they're funny, and they came to protest your views, I guess on date rape or something. And they came, and they were going to make trouble, but then they were so outnumbered, and they were sort of mesmerized by you, and I sort of watched as they quietly melted away. So,
you see, because they were very used to disrupting speakers who read prepared texts, and I do improv, okay, in controversial situations, and it's very difficult to deal with, because everything negative that came from the floor, I would just like do something with it and throw it right back.
Well, that's the way to do it. And
I was trained in the school of Joan Rivers.
Oh, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
As God is my witness, I will not read a speech again. It's just not on camera. No, it's actually not a good idea. It's better just to talk to the audience.
Yeah.
So this is what happened a couple of weeks ago. Went to UMass Amherst, and I was there with Milo Yiannopoulos, who is this provocateur, satirist, self-described shit poster, and just funny, and he says provocative things, very, very amusing to me, not to everyone. And I have to correct him. He does go too far. So he's sort of like it's not really good cop, bad cop. It's more like concerned mother and wayward son. And we've gone to a few campuses together. And then we had a comedian, this wonderful comedian, Steve Crowder. So there were three of us. As soon as we come on, people in the audience, so they're dispersed around, they start screeching and yelling, and then Milo says something, and he's doing what you say. He makes some. I won't repeat what Milo said, but that provoked him. And then I went up as based mom, to be reasonable. I thought, well, I upset them even more. They were screaming even more. They were using a foul language. It's all on tape, so it's kind of gone viral. But there was not a moment. They weren't screaming. And no, I don't know where the campus police were. Apparently this is permitted. But at one point, Milo said, we're not going away. We're here. We're going to give our talk. And then the comedian did this little riff. He was angry at them. And that's also gone viral on the internet. But my hope is that, so this has all been covered by the conservative press. Not a word in the New York Times. Not a word in the New Republic or on, Slate. No one's, the liberal media is not paying attention. So I'm very concerned that, last time we had the help of the liberal media, and that didn't work, so maybe not having them, maybe it doesn't matter. But I'm just sort of wondering when, who's going to come forward and defend just free speech? Where is that right now? Where is the movement? Where are the Nat Hentoff? Well, Nat Hentoff is still there, but in those days we had just so many people coming forward and defending free speech, and you had people.
I think there has to be pressure on the colleges and universities themselves to maintain an atmosphere for civil discourse and for hospitality to guests of any political persuasion. And without that kind of backbone, coming from the college administrators themselves, I think this is going to go on. But I feel that there is slowly a sense of things turning, that the seriousness of it, is starting to become aware, that this is really getting absurd now.
And I also think some of I think a lot of the millennials who've sort of, because it's a scrappy generation, and it's also, they're all connected on the internet, and so they talk to each other. We haven't heard from them yet. I think every generation, faces a threat to freedom. You always have to fight for it. In the 50s, you had the McCarthy era, and earlier generations, there's always movements that come along and have good reasons why someone should have to shut up and keep quiet, and so it's, these censorship campaigns. So this generation is being challenged, and I think I'm seeing signs of rebellion. But
I don't think students realize that kind of power that they have for pushback against the college administrations. They keep on accepting all of this paternalism, this kind of suffocating, all-enveloping paternalism.
Right, and I think the activists, these social justice warriors on campus, they know the power they have over administrators.
Yes, that's right.
Someone taped a young woman going into an office in at Vassar College, demanding that a copy of it was a setup. It was someone filming this poor administrator, really. So this sort of pretend student went in with a copy of the U.S. Constitution. I think it was at Vassar, and she wanted it shredded because it was triggering. And the media the conservative media had a good time with it because it was showing that here's an administrator that would shred the Constitution. That's not what I saw in the tape. I saw a frightened administrator, terrified of this young woman, probably thinking, am I going to lose my job if this doesn't? And she was a hostage. This administrator was like a frightened hostage. And this is what I think. I think that, so what I want the millennials to understand, the social justice activists and the trigger, the safe space people on campus, they are pressuring and frightening the administrators who are giving in to them, which is nothing these administrators should be proud of. But it's time for a pushback from the students who value free speech, who value rational scholarship, who would like to be free individuals and to stop the policing of sexuality. All of these things have to be fought for again.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it has to be a new movement, a new free speech movement. In my view, it has to be, and it has to come from the students, as it did the first time with Mario Savio.
I was just going to say we need the Mario Savios,
That's right.
and they, at that time they had a lot to lose too, and so because that's what the students will tell you. They'll tell you, college is so expensive, and if I get in trouble, and now you can be marked as a rape culture apologist or a racist simply by challenging. Simply by asking for an open debate, you can be. There's a lot of, stigma.
Well, the administrators are, they are now running essentially a business. Okay, the colleges are all competitive with each other. They're desperate for tuition dollars. So the bureaucrats are all about protecting the PR image of the university. So they want to be on the politically correct side of protecting those who have suffered from racial or gender injustice in the past, et cetera. I mean, there really is this kind of, speak of sanctimonious, this puffed up view of themselves as somehow part, of the progressive movement of social justice in the universe, by suppressing people of dissident views on campus.
And you can't even get, there are, and I've been writing about this for years, as you know, there's now this set of, it's just a body of egregiously false information at the heart of campus radicalism, particularly campus feminism. And 21 years ago, we were talking about false statistics on rape, false statistics on the wage gap. This wage gap
it's still going on.
It will never go away.
It's so ridiculous.
So this one statistician said a phony statistic is harder to kill than a vampire, once it's out in the media. A false feminist statistic is the hardest to kill of all.
It's unbelievable.
It is beyond the reach of rational analysis.
No one understands that, for heaven's sakes, John Kennedy signed the equal pay bill. It was like decades ago. It was like half a century ago. And there are very rare cases of a woman being paid less than a man for doing the same job. Okay, right. The same job. They don't understand that. So simple.
No
point.
Responsible economist would tell you otherwise.
Oh my Lord!
And yet, when I say this on campus, I shrieks and some young woman at Oberlin, I remember saying, well. If you want to make as much as a man, you should change your major, because on average, men are more likely to study these highly, remunerative fields, petroleum engineering or naval architecture. And I just said to the Oberlin, if you study feminist dance therapy, you might not earn as much. Oh my goodness, they were outraged, and at the idea that they couldn't study what they want and then earn as much, and so forth. And they carry on, but so we've got this propaganda. There's no way to correct it, and then you get shouted down on campus if you even suggest.
Well, the biggest gap in women's studies is the failure to have a requirement about biology.
Oh, well,
there's no reference to biology. You've had now 40 years of women's studies, right, with the social constructionist view of gender, without the slightest reference to hormones or endocrinology or anything else.
40 years of women's studies, and I think we know less about gender than we did when they started, for this very reason, this dogma. Oh, that men and women are the same, that we're cognitively interchangeable.
We're blank slates at birth, and society inscribes gender on us.
Yes.
It's absurd.
Yes, as one feminist philosopher said many years ago, we're all born bisexual, and then through socialization, we're transformed into gendered human beings, one destined to command, the other to obey. So I once read that to my husband, who said, which one commands and which obeys.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I'm someone who was writing a dissertation on androgyny. Okay, and I never, for one moment in my entire life, have questioned that the sexes are actually different, and that there's a very powerful hormonal compulsion that drives the sexes together for procreation. Hello. Okay.
And it's so obvious. Yeah. And people say, well, what's the evidence? Well, let's start with the entire anthropological record, or just go into any. Just look at a magazine rack, and it's clear that men are looking, on average, I'm not talking about all men and all women, but on average, there are different propensities.
Men have 8 to 10 times the amount of testosterone, okay, circulating in their bodies than women do. Okay, I mean, as if there aren't consequences from that. But of course, this subject is something utterly untouched. Okay, in gender studies, you could graduate with a degree in women's studies and know nothing about it.
Nothing to know. And so. Anytime they find statistical disparity between men and women in any field, if there are more male, petroleum engineers, it has to be discrimination.
Right. It can't be women's free choice for any reason.
Free choice, and that on average, women are interested in other things.
Absolutely. And also women want more flexibility in their lives to allow for children. But that's not also part of the feminist equation.
And as if we don't have a special bond with children. As if, it's so absurd. The denial of nature, the denial of femininity and masculinity.
Absolutely.
Which for most people, it's a source of enjoyment and if you are conventionally feminine, you enjoy that typically, and the same with male, and you enjoy a masculine man, and all of this is now sort of either denied or there's this aura of disapproval around conventional sexuality, and there's a little pushback in the academy. And so,
well, it's because there's no knowledge. Okay, and people are just settled, okay, and sluggish within their little cells, the ideological cells, and there really are very few truly inquiring minds left. Okay, no true intellectuals. Okay, really in the academy. The academy is now, of course, the colleges and universities have never been known for producing free thinkers. Okay, it is after all a bureaucratic entity, the academy. But that's what if we want intellectuals, this is. So the present system is certainly not the way to produce them.
Oh, I'm just wondering, what is this generation? Are we going to have some great public intellectuals coming forth who aren't just spouting dogma?
You think that
slogans?
the web would allow people to have free and independent thought, but no.
Oh no, you have these people,
and
these little Twitter mobs that are policing everyone.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll have. These incidents, this poor comet scientist who wore the wrong shirt to a press conference, and then, they were hysterical on the internet to punish him and censure him, and these kind of things happen.
The parochialism of their minds, the banality of their minds. Okay?
I know. Why aren't more people like us? Why don't more people see it?
Well, we're the product of a certain time. Okay, I realize that now, and I'm trying actually not to be too hard, okay, on the young people today, because they didn't have our kind of background. Okay, our parents
and the comedians, Mort Saul and Lenny Bruce, and then George Carlin,
comedians,
and Richard Pryor, and so today the comedians aren't allowed on campus.
Yes, that's right.
Triggering and they don't want to go.
Humor comes from violating taboos. Okay, all right. If you have a taboo about women or race or anything else, then you're attracting humor toward it. Okay, any rigidity attracts humor because satire breaks up. Okay, the rigidity.
So anyway, my question here is. I think this propaganda and the denial that there are differences between the sexes, they've just built up this. It's a big lie, and it's almost to me comparable. I can't carry out this analogy too far, but like the credit default swaps, and there was all of these bad mortgages distributed everywhere. No one knew where they were, but they were everywhere in the economy, and then it brought it down. And I see this is like this feminist misinformation. We have feminist misinformation in every area, disseminated by these credulous journalists who don't ask the right questions. So everybody believes sexes are exactly the same. And, that there's this wage gap, that there's this rape culture on campus, that women are, victims and men. All of this is out there. Large numbers of people believing something that's just not true.
Well, you have to realize that a lot of people in the media now are products of those PC elite schools. I encounter them all the time, and trying to get their minds to focus. They have I'm talking about Yale degrees, Harvard degrees, Princeton
the more
degrees.
prestigious the degree, the more likely it is.
Absolutely. Their minds are like
a whole
pudding.
generation
they can't focus.
Of young women.
They have no knowledge.
They've been miseducated.
And they're in the media. They're writing in the New York Times or doing political analysis in the New York Times. They know nothing.
They know nothing, but they have a lot of confidence, very high self-esteem.
Yes.
No problem there.
They have these like bright and shiny degrees, which are in fact meaningless and valueless. Worthless degrees. Worthless Ivy League degrees.
They should go back. They should go, I don't know.
Remember, I used to say that Naomi Wolf, her parents should have sued Yale for her maleducation.
Susan Faluti's parents should have sued.
Susan Faluti and Naomi Wolf, these are two very smart women, who were defrauded by their elite school education. Look how their careers have tanked. Why is that? Okay?
Well, we're going to see that.
They didn't have the solid, rigorous education you and I did.
They don't have
I went to the State University of New York at Binghamton. I had a superb education in the basics, and that is fueling my productivity at my stage of life. But look at Susan Faludi and Naomi Wolf, They start out so strong, and there's nothing, because they have nothing underneath it.
And I identify with them in this way. When I came from Southern California in the hippie era, I was a flower child, and so if I had come to college and they had courses in witchcraft, I was interested in that. My friend in high school was Mimi Simo. She became a witch. She was a brilliant girl, but she became Starhawk, and I don't know. We were friends, but then she became, maybe we could still be friends, but I wouldn't want her to put a hex on me. But I went to NYU, and I would, if they'd had kooky majors, I would have gone, in for them. I would have been a witchcraft major, I think, and maybe. But the most interesting thing I could find was philosophy. Mm-hmm. And my philosophy professors at NYU, it was clear thinking and rigor and precision, rules. And coming as a flower, I thought it was far out. Yeah, I thought it was. They were. We read this book, Language, Truth, and Logic by A.J. Ayer. It was a very extreme kind of a statement of the need for a logical rigor in your thought and so forth. And I loved it. I fell in love with it. And I slowly, class after class, I had, reading the great philosophers. And I slowly became a disciplined thinker. I like to think that I did. But I always knew, how I once saw the world, and then the transformation. Of course, that's what I hope to do in the classroom. What I see now is that 17-year-old, 18-year-old Christina coming from the California flower child culture, and a lot of kids are coming from all sorts of backgrounds. Say that you come to school, it would be reinforced. It would be catered to. I couldn't, and you could run to the dean. I could have run to the dean and say, well, nothing, I'm not really giving the courses that I would like to study. You can design your own major.
That's right. It's cafeteria style.
The cafeteria style. And it's even in the museums now.
Oh, absolutely.
I was just recently the museums. I was in Portland. I was in Portland, and I went to the local museum, and there was a beautiful display of some Indian artifacts and some exquisite photographs of Indians, Native Americans, and the works of art. It was all beautiful. But in every room there was some feminist art historian had written a hectoring little description, censuring and talking about the gaze of the tourist and all this kind of deconstruction, and so you couldn't learn about the art, and you couldn't enjoy it. It had to be mediated through the mind of this fanatical
ideological perspective had to be filtered through, right? The judgmentalism, the moralism, the guilt tripping, and so on.
Instead of
an actual encounter with an artifact from the past, and a sense of awe, and reverence before that object. No, we have to have this interposed contemporary figure hectoring us. Exactly what you said.
Us. Yeah. So that's
the sermon. They're new preachers.
The new scolds.
It's a new moralist. Scolds.
They're
perfect.
Scolds.
Perfect. The new scolds.
They're scolds. They're pests. And but it's now not. So we see it going into the media. That's a given. And now in the museums, and then there's this cultural appropriation. this is one of the new ideas that, if at some level, a lot of this there's a kernel of wisdom that, you don't put on blackface and essentially demean another culture in that way. But now they're going after yoga classes and that sort of thing. You're not supposed to say namaste. That's going to put all of Portland out of work. It's nothing but yoga studios. But I don't know. But in now performances of the Mikado, the Gilbert and Sullivan, people are saying, oh, well, that was cultural appropriation. It's demeaning. You had a museum in Boston where they have beautiful kimonos and on display, and you can have. Well, now there were protesters. And the protesters didn't seem to be from, it's almost always people that aren't in that culture that are the most shrill. And so the Boston Museum, the Museum of Fine had to apologize.
Oh, I don't believe
So this is going on. So it's, it's permeating the culture.
Yes,
and I want it to stop.
Yes, that's right. Right.
So
it's so unsophisticated. Okay. This is not the way.
Anti-intellectual.
This is not the way that you contemplate history and art. Okay. Through these, the contemporary political filter. This distorts the true meaning of history and art.
Trivializes.
And trivializes.
And that's what I see with students. They're not having these encounters with great works of art.
Right.
And that's what a teacher should do.
We were produced by a great books curriculum.
We always had, no matter what, even if you had a bad teacher, you always had a classic. And so they've been...
a sense of respect for the greatness of the work, not this debunking,
now they have a
sneering,
sense
deconstruction.
of superiority.
Exactly. Oh, this is like a product of all kinds of outmoded racial or gender paradigms and so on.
Oh, yes.
Give me a break, okay? The whole history of the world is seen through this contemporary lens. It's absolutely, and that's why we're not getting any important intellectuals, young writers, young analysts, okay? If you're ever going to get any, they have got to start going back to the library and finding other independent thinkers, because they're certainly not being presented with them in the classroom.
They're just not.
No.
So that's the message you're going to students today. You cannot depend on your
Don't depend on the teachers. No. Distrust authority, resist authority, and go and find what you need in the library. And don't just sit there on your rear end in front of the computer, because the computer self-selects, for you. Okay, you're not going to find. You have to go and physically engage with the things on the shelves. That's what I did. I ransacked the Yale University Library.
And our universities have been, someone called our universities islands of repression in a sea of freedom. Students have to liberate their islands. So we're here to foment rebellion.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. Well, thank you, Camille.
Well, great, Christina, as usual.
So I hope
we always agree.
20 years from now, and oh goodness.
That's right. Okay.
And it'll be free again, and liberated, and
let's hope free speech is restored.
Yes, and sanity. Well, thank you.